they're still scared, so just, they've done fantastic. We have 4 more to go. It's my last 4, so I'm sorry if you hear a lot of sniffling back there, because I'm struggling. It's gonna be okay. To start us off, we have Carly.
Is important because it affects 47% of women who use tampons as their primary product for menstruation. In addition to this, there are other uses that people often don't recognize for tampons, such as filtration for water when camping or hiking, and stopping nosebleeds. Organic tampons are often marketed to be better for your health than traditional tampons. So that's an important thing to recognize, to measure the difference between the 2 groups. Lead, if it is contained in tampons, can be detrimental to the health of individuals because it is toxic in any amount. And pink tax is a very important thing to recognize. It is a socioeconomic concept which states that products that are marketed towards women are often priced higher than products that are marketed towards men. This, in addition to lead content in tampons, really highlights the way that women's health issues are often overlooked. When it comes to menstruation products, there are many different choices that women can make. They can choose to use pads, tampons, or reusable products such as menstrual cups and menstrual discs. A study by DeVito showed that dioxins are present in tampons and they have higher concentrations in organic tampons when compared to traditional. A study by Lebovic showed that lead, when injected into primates, could cause endometriosis, but could also increase the severity of symptoms if it was already present. And toxic shock syndrome is a very severe condition that is related to tampon usage. It often leads to death, but in minor cases it can have symptoms such as fever and seizures. There are many influences on the buying choices of women when they are choosing what product they would want to use. So a study by Yukida showed that women who have busier lifestyles or sportier lifestyles are more likely to use tampons than any other product. Culture is also a big impact on this choice because women are likely to use the same product that they see that their female role model uses in their life, such as a grandmother, a mother, or an aunt. And social media. The rise of environmental friendly awareness on social media has increased the number of women who choose to use organic products or reusable products. When discussing this, it is very important to recognize the physiology of the vaginal canal. It has a high permeability due to its the makeup of its epithelium, which is a simple squamous epithelium. This means that the innermost cells are very thin, but there's also only one layer. So this allows for easy diffusion into the capillary bed. So toxins that are introduced into the epithelium can go straight into the venous system. This is similar in the placenta. A study by Rostron showed that when women carried congenital diseases such as syphilis, it could be passed over the placenta to a baby. Lead, if it is contained in tampons, I said before, would be very detrimental to the health of individuals. Lead exposure is often related to high blood pressure in adults and seizures, but when children are exposed to lead, they often suffer from developmental delays. And a study by Cianto showed that arsenic is another chemical that is present in tampons. A study by Milton et al. Showed that when exposed to arsenic, that sea urchins were likely to experience fertility issues. Currently, the only state to have regulations on tampons is New York. They require that manufacturing companies list the ingredients on their packaging, but through my research, I found that they may not be completely transparent with the ingredients that they contain. This can be known as a concept called greenwashing, where an organic company claims to be better for your health or better for the environment when they truly are not. A study by Forkheiser showed that when comparing the life cycle assessment of various different products, that organic tampons were the most harmful to the environment as they use the most natural resources to produce. All of this leads me to my research question. Is there a significant difference between lead levels in traditional versus organic tampons? For my method, I analyzed previous studies and decided that I would do an observational experiment comparing the lead content in organic and traditional tampons. For my samples, I used 3 organic brands and 3 inorganic brands, as you can see in the picture here. And I labeled each sample and completed a simple random sample to determine which products I would use. To prepare my samples, I removed each tampon from their packaging and applicator. I placed them in a solo cup with half a cup of water and soaked them for 8 hours to replicate the amount of time that the product would be used. I used water testing strips to test the water for lead content, and I recorded the data in an Excel spreadsheet. My null hypothesis was that there would be an equal proportion of lead presence in both of the 2 groups, and my alternative hypothesis, or the hypothesis that I believe to be true, is that there would not be equal proportions between both of my groups. I found that 50% of organic tampons contain lead, 90% of traditional tampons contain lead, which equated to 70% of my total samples. I conducted a 2-proposition z-test and got a z-score of -3.381 and a p-value of 0.007. This means that this is the chance that I got my results simply by chance. This, in comparison to my alpha level of 0.05, showed statistical significance, which allowed me to reject the null hypothesis. Because I rejected the null hypothesis, this means that my alternative hypothesis was true and that there was a difference in the proportion in my 2 groups, with traditional tampons containing higher lead than organic tampons. This can be due to ingredient processing. I found in my research that cotton fields that were located in more urban areas were likely to absorb runoff from factories or car exhausts. This is important because lead could be detrimental to the health of individuals. I had various limitations to my study, including sample size, where I only used 30 samples for each of my 2 groups. I also experienced I could also improve my sample variation, where I only had 3 brands for each of my groups, and the test quality could have affected my results. I would encourage future researchers to study the effects of lead on women's health specifically, and to hold brands accountable for being completely transparent on what is contained in their products. I would like to say thank you to the judges, the audience, and Ms. Samantha Spencer for supporting me throughout the last 2 years of my research. Thank you. I will now take questions.
Okay, my question is, are there specific health conditions that benefit more from using organic tampons versus the inorganic?
So in my research, I found that organic tampons were more likely to contain arsenic and dioxins. So I would say that because arsenic and dioxins are linked to increasing the severity of endometriosis, I would say that for health conditions, it would be better to use a traditional tampon over an organic tampon. Thank you.
I'm having to think because Ms. Jarrett stole my question, more or less. I guess, what kind of safety standards do you think need to be out there and labeling needs to be present now on the different types of tampons that there are?
So I think that the regulations in New York are a good step forward in the direction that we should be going with disclosure of ingredients in tampons. I think that it's important that that is required everywhere, but also that they're completely transparent and that there are more studies that can help us better understand what is actually inside of them. Thank you.
First of all, as the only male on the judging panel, I just want to apologize for all the women in the room for everything you guys have to go through. What I'm curious about is, since I have no knowledge of this, would you recommend women, should they switch to, based on your research, should they switch to a different type of product if they do use tampons? Should they switch to another alternative based on what you've seen? Like, is it a big enough risk to where you're like, yeah, you should consider using a different type?
I would say that it is. It definitely is a big enough risk because of the effects that these chemicals can have on your body. In my research, I found that menstrual cups had the least amount of chemicals contained inside of them when they were undyed. Thank you.
Did you find that the wrapping of the tampon, be it cardboard or plastic, had any effect on the actual tampon itself?
That's a good question. I didn't really look into whether that had an effect on my results. However, I would assume that the plastic would be, that the plastic may increase the amount of chemicals because there are more chemicals in plastic than in cardboard. Thank you.
Ms. Carlton tried to steal my answer. So I'm gonna change it just a little. You said that you think the regulations should be everywhere, and you mentioned in New York. In your research, did you find any information about other states that might be looking into that kind of regulation?
I actually did not, but I think that it's very important that they do form regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. Next up, we have Brianna.
Good evening. Today I'm presenting my senior research project on a study of the association of gender and cookies weakness preference. So, a little bit about me. My name is Brianna Ortiz. I currently am a senior at Bassett High School, and I'm planning on attending George Mason University in fall to study cybersecurity. So why this topic? I chose this topic because I love baking as a hobby, and I wanted to do research on something I enjoyed. And there's also, I grew up listening to social beliefs that women are more sensitive towards food and that they prefer sweeter things, so I wanted to see if this was true. Furthermore, I think this study also helps bakers know what their consumers like and what's produce for them. So, before I did my study, I wanted to do research on why there's different preferences and tastes. So, to begin, humans are born with different taste receptors. These taste receptors analyze the taste of sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. And because of this, because humans are born with different variations of taste receptors, this causes to a different sensitivity towards taste. Some humans are born with more taste receptors than others. This causes them to have a higher sensitivity towards certain senses of taste, such as being more sensitive towards sweet or bitter foods. Additionally, age also plays an effect on different taste perceptions. In a study by Fernandez, they showed that elderly people and children had a higher sweetness preference compared to younger adults. Also, the way we see how people perceive food and how they enjoy it could also affect the way we enjoy food. Furthermore, the health and diet behaviors cause different sweetness preferences. For example, health consciousness affects this. People who are more conscious about their health and know the danger sugars can cause will consume less sweeter foods, and this will most likely give them a less sugar preference. Additionally, diets also play a factor in sweetness preference. People who mainly consume like foods or sweeter foods will obviously have a higher sweetness preference compared to people who prefer bitter, spicier, or savory foods. In a study done by Zoe, they show that they tested different diets of different variabilities of vegetables and energy levels. Regardless of the vegetable amounts each of the diet groups had, it showed that women crave sweeter things after eating their meal of vegetables compared to men who crave savory foods. Furthermore, because of health consciousness and diets, this caused people to consume sugar alternatives. Sugar alternatives are good to lead to not eating a fast consumption of sugar. However, a prolonged use of sugar alternatives will lead to a craving for sugars and will increase the sweetness preference. Another factor that causes different sweetness preference is cultural and social influences. Cultural norms such as diets, your home, and culture also affects what we consume. Cultural difference also affects this. In a study done by they show that Asian people have more sensitivity towards sweetness and other tastes compared to Caucasian people who did not show that high sensitivity. Furthermore, marketing also affects what people consume and what to get. In a study done by Baxter, they changed the packaging of a chocolate and they changed the color of it to see how people perceived it. Many people perceive the chocolate with a brighter color packaging to be more sweeter, and they would want to consume it compared to a darker packaging, which they perceive as bitter. This shows that the packaging influences what people consume and what they get. Additionally to this, similar to this, a study done by Scaffer showed that there are the psychological connections between words and flavors. For example, words such as sweet are viewed as positive, whereas words as bitter are viewed as negative. Because of this, more people crave and go towards sweeter things because it has the more positive connotation. Another factor is the psychological factors. Menstrual cycles also cause women to crave more sweeter things. In multiple studies, it showed that women have a higher intake of sugars throughout the menstrual cycle. Furthermore, the release of hormones such as estrogen also influence more sweetness preference and also cause a higher sensitivity towards taste. Additionally to this, hunger hormones such as ghrelin also cause a higher sensitivity towards taste. In a study done they also measured two groups, male and female, who went on a fasting after 10 hours, and they wanted to see if the ghrelin was different between the male and females. They found that females had more ghrelin in their body compared to men in their blood sample. This shows that women probably will have more higher sensitivity towards taste compared to men because they have more ghrelin in their body. Furthermore, cravings also affect your sweetness preference. If your brain wants something sweet, obviously consume something sweeter. So this leads to a higher consumption of sugar. And when you eat sugar, your body releases a reward system and sometimes releases dopamine. And dopamine causes a pleasure in your body, which then wants it to crave it more. So this also affects the sugar consumption. So with all this research, this led me to my research question: does the sweetness preference of cookie differ amongst male and female consumers? So for our method, because male and females have different taste perceptions, I believe that there is an association between gender and sweetness preference. And my study was observational because I did not have a control group, and I was observing the sugar content preference. So for my materials, I used I had two cookie groups that I used the same cookie ingredients for, except in my cookie group 3, which was going to be my less sweeter cookie, I cut 1/3 of the sugar and used sugar-free chocolate chips. I also had a blindfold so I could blindfold my subjects to not see the cookie because reducing sugar causes the cookie to be smaller and a darker color. Furthermore, I gave them water to cleanse their palate in between the tasting of cookie. I also had a Google form to give out to them. So for my procedures, I made my cookies with different sugar levels. I used a stratified random sample to collect my subjects, where I separated them into between a female group and a male group. I gave them a blindfold taste test where I blindfolded them and then gave them the cookie A and let them try it. Then I gave them cookie B and let them try it. And with this, I gave them a Google form where they gave their age, gender, and which cookie they preferred. And I put their responses in an Excel sheet. So for my hypothesis, my null hypothesis, which is what is assumed, is that there is not an association between sweetness preference and gender. And my alternative hypothesis, which is what I want to prove, is there is an association between sweetness preference and gender. So for my results, I had an equal amount of females choosing cookie A and cookie B, but more male people chose cookie A, which was the more sweeter cookie. But looking at my results, I saw that there was not really a significant difference between them. So this led me to assume I was most likely going to fail to reject my null hypothesis. So with my results, I conducted a chi-square test of association. With this, I got the chi-square test which measures the observed and expected values. I got 1.6, around 1.6, which is close to 0, so that means there is not a significant difference between these values. Additionally, I got a p-value of around 0.206, which means that if there is not an association between the gender and sweetness preference, then there's a 20% chance I got this by random chance alone. And because my p-value is greater than my alpha level of 0.05, I failed to reject my null hypothesis that there is not an association between sweetness preference. So because I did not have significant evidence of the 0.50 level of significance to conclude that sweetness preference and gender are associated, this did not align with my research that mainly had evidence to prove that there's a difference between sweetness preference, between gender and their sweetness preference. But I also believe that this is important because it shows producers who to target and who to produce for more. and who to lean towards. So I had a couple limitations in my study. My sample size. I had a sample size 62, which is small compared to other studies. I had 31 males and 31 females. I also had some self-report bias. Some people could have reported that they preferred cookie beans to appear more healthier. This could be prevented by assuring the people that it's fully anonymous and won't be judged. There's also a cultural difference. I mainly had Hispanic participants. This could be the reason why my study did not align with the studies I studied. And age, most of my participants were over 30, and because I found that age also plays a factor in the sweetness preference, I believe that if I had younger people, it probably would have skewed it differently. And also the food type. I chose to study cookie, however, I think having different varieties of food will change the effect of sweetness preference. So for future research, they should have diverse participants, which have different ages and culture and ethnicities. I also believe that they should have different food types to observe, where they should have savory and sweeter foods to see which gender prefers which more. And they should ask more questions to why the participants chose those foods rather than another. So I would like to give my thanks first to my participants for participating in my study. I'd also like to give thanks to my friends and family because they supported me and helped me throughout this experiment. I'd also like to thank Ms. Shannon Carroll because she taught me most of the stats I need to know and motivated me a lot throughout this year. I'd also like to thank Ms. Samantha Spencer because without her this wouldn't have been possible, and I'm really grateful to have her as a teacher and for her to teach me research. I'd also like to thank my judges and audience for being here today and listening to this presentation. I'll now take questions.
My first question you answered after I wrote it down, so. Do you think that your results would hold true if you had been able to have a larger sample size?
I believe that my results would have been different because I also saw a study that kind of was similar to this, and they mainly found that there was a difference between genders and their sweetness preference.
What do you think the difference would have been had you used a liquid form drinks instead of food, sweetness in drinks versus food?
I believe that this would have caused a difference. For me personally, I think that sugary drinks appeal more to people compared to like water, because some people find that boring. So I think that probably would have caused people to choose the sugary one more rather than the like water.
I'm actually curious, as you were conducting your study, you said you had them fill out a Google Doc after you were finished. I'm actually curious, was there a specific reason that you didn't sort of record those on paper as they were finishing, that you specifically wanted them to fill out a Google Doc, or what was the process behind that?
I mainly filled out a Google form because I thought it was a little more quicker, but also I think it gave them more, like, to be more not secretive, but have more like anonymity, so like they wouldn't look at me watching them fill out a sheet.
Yeah.
So what do you think the extent of taste preferences are a result of personal habits versus just biology tendencies with the genders?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you think that taste preferences are just kind of based on habit, like personal habits that they've developed, or do you think biology plays a role in that?
I think both factors plays a part of this. Like I said, the taste receptors in your body, like since there's a difference between everybody, they have a different amount, so I think that plays a part of it. But also, some people like do not care as much for their health or what their body says to them, so they will consume sugar regardless. So I also think it depends on the person. and what they want to consume.
All right, before I ask my question, your results, what were your results again?
So there wasn't an association between gender and sweetness preference.
So women, men, it didn't matter, sweetness preference, it really wasn't, there wasn't a connection, correct?
No.
Okay, that's my question anyway. Do you think men have a tendency to underreport their preference for sweets due to social norms and gender expectations?
Yes, I think that because people probably perceive sweetness as like a girly thing or something like that, that men probably like, oh, I don't want this. This wasn't like in my research, but I recently saw like a TikTok where they would say that, oh, this type of candy is girl candy, this type of candy is boy candy. So, and like the boy candy was more like bittery chocolates compared to the sweeter chocolates. So I think that also plays a role.
Thank you, Brianna. Next up, we have Alexa.
Okay, hello. My name is Alexa Martel-Rios. I am a current student at Piedmont Governor School, and my main focus is going to be on the recognition of AI in music composition. So, a little bit about myself. I currently attend Bassett High School. I'm planning to attend William and Mary, and I plan to focus on business and international relations. As you can see, that is not a picture of me, but that would be me if I were eating hamburgers. So, getting into the background of everything, music has been around for ages. We all interact with music in one way, shape, or form, whether it be through the radio or through personal time. For me, for example, I love listening to music, so I'm always, in my downtime, it's in my ears. And it has played a role in lots of things in our lives. So, for example, we all know famous composers like Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach, and they have also played a big role in the music transition and how everything has progressed. We are also starting to get into more compositional AI pieces. So AI is starting to form itself into music, which is something new. It hasn't been something that we used to focus on, but it's starting to create something that people are deciding to look into, which is interesting. This ends up leading some kind of concerns for people because to most people, music is something that humans make, something that we generate out of our own feelings and emotions. And then putting AI into that, it's kind of like, well, where is the component of sentiment? And that's when comparisons start being brought along, and people are wondering whether or not AI could actually live up to human compositions. A little bit of the background on AI. So AI actually dates back to the 1950s, which is, well, not too crazy long, but to me it is. And it was originally brought up so that people could create tasks easier. So AI was made to help humans in different ways instead of keeping us away. But it's also brought up worries at this point right now because, for example, right now, AI has progressed to the point where we have things like ChatGPT, and for teachers that is a concern, obviously, because people are using it to make fake essays or lie on their tests and everything. And for music, it's kind of the same thing where people are wondering, well, was this made by a human? Do I actually want to support this if you didn't do the work? And it's making people question the future of it. Although for me personally, I think people shouldn't worry too much because some people worry that it'll like take over their jobs after a certain period of time. But I don't think that will happen because a study was done by Worth et al. And he actually had AI create math problems for his class. And when presented to that class, they actually weren't able to find it useful. It didn't help them very much in comparison to an actual teacher creating the problems and focusing on real situations. AI wasn't able to do that. And I know I'm talking a lot about AI in a negative format, but there are some positives to it. So AI actually, right now, they're helping in medical fields a lot. So instead of having to fill out a bunch of information, AI helps fill out the general knowledge that they have to put down, and it makes their lives a lot easier and a lot less time consuming, which allows them to work harder and faster to get things out. So music also plays a big role in our brain in the form of stimulation. It helps with neurological issues in different ways. There was actually a study done by Ushri et al. In which he had a group with no music and then a group with music. And when it was done, he found that the group with music actually had a calmer time. Their neurons were more relaxed, and even though it was just a calm, stable environment, which is something interesting to look at. It also plays a big role in our emotions. So whether we're happy, we're sad, or we're angry, those can amplify or dim down based on what we're listening to. So let's say I'm like sobbing my eyes out and I start playing Happy by Pharrell Williams. I'm probably gonna stop sobbing and start jamming out. I'm gonna become happy because I'm listening to that music. So it's changing the way we view things, or the opposite way. It also affects our cognitive abilities. So there was a study done by Gosh et al. And he found that when children learn music instruments at a young age, it actually helps them in their creativity, their memory, and their attention span. So overall, it helps as well with information processing. So music does play a big important role, especially since a young age. So music is very important for composers specifically. It's a way for them to let out their own emotions and everything, their feelings. So, like I previously mentioned, if they're sad, they're happy, if they're in love, for example, this is gonna reflect in their music compositions. They're gonna create songs that reflect their feelings in that way, which I think is really beautiful. Apart from that, they also look at inspiration for different things. So whether it be the weather, their relationships, or even some actually could look at a leaf falling and be like, wow, I'm gonna write about that. And they will, they really will. It's beautiful, it's amazing. The creativity they have is outstanding. And I think that's really unique as well. Like I said, creativity, there was a study done by Norman in which he actually brought an application to an elementary classroom. He had a composition in it already, and he gave it to elementary students. And he said, here you go, create your own piece. And the application allowed them to play with the piece, change the tone and pitch, and it allowed them to just create their own piece based off of that. So when it was done, they all had unique pieces, and it was actually really beautiful. So also, I've heard that some people might think this is considered AI, but it really isn't, because it's an application and it's not being created by itself. So AI is not really playing a role into this. AI right now, it is starting to be used in music a lot more, like I had previously said. So that's something to take into account. There was a study done by Bentel et al. Where he wanted to see this in play, and he created an entire album only using AI. He had a human composer try to like humanize it a bit, so not many changes were made. And he uploaded it to his website saying it was an old music that like thing he found. And everybody absolutely loved it. They thought it was amazing, they thought it was unique. They were like, wow, this is beautiful. But then when he revealed that it was actually AI, they switched up really quickly. They started talking about how it was dishonest and genuine, and they absolutely hated it, which I found interesting because at first they liked it and then they did it just because they found out it was AI. It also plays a role in our composition now. So they're trying out new formats, and it varies in the way it's used. So it can be used 100% where the whole thing is created by AI, or it's only being used in certain pieces in the music to like make it better or change it to the way they want it to fit. And then also it is affecting our music fields. So not just the music industry, but also like music teaching. So there's positives and negatives to this. Some people think it cuts back on costs, which makes it more efficient. but also people are wondering whether or not it would help them in the long run just because it doesn't contain the same sentiment and it can lack originality in the end. This ends up leading me to my research question, which is, can people distinguish the difference between AI composed music or human composed music? For my method, I had originally thought that it would be undifferentiable because since AI has progressed so much and we haven't seen it in music that much, I thought no one would be able to tell the difference. And I ended up using an experimental group. So I had one group with AI music and then the other group with non-AI music. For my materials, I used a Google survey where I had them fill it out. I used YouTube to find the human composition, and then I used Music GPT to create a AI fully composed piece. And I try to find a piece that matched both in the same way, so if someone were to look at them, they would sound the same in some ways, but not entirely. To collect my data, I had Bassett High School staff take place into this, since I go there. I had them consent last semester and in the Google survey as well, so that it would be for certain that they wanted to participate in the study. When I took the survey, I had them fill out a Google form. It had the consent form as long with the music piece that I included and a yes or no format of whether or not they thought it was AI or not. I had a sample size of about 60 teachers and staff, and I split them off into groups of 30 for each, randomized so I wouldn't be able to pick and choose who it was. Afterwards, I stored that data into sheets, and that's where I have everything. For my hypothesis, my null hypothesis, which is what we think is assumed of based on previous knowledge, it is that there would be no association between whether or not music is heard and the type of composition. And then my alternative, which is what I assume, is that there would be an association between the type of music heard and the type of composition. For my results, I ended up doing a chi-square test for association. So I actually didn't know how to do that at all, and I did have to look at the YouTube video. That was okay. I ended up with a confidence interval of 0.05, and my p-value at the end was 0.055. If you look at my graph right there, it's a bit small, but you can kind of read it. The one on the left is going to be my observed, which is what I ended up having, so my results for AI and non-AI. And then on the right, it's going to be my observed, which is my expected, which is what the graph thought would end up happening. In the end, I ended up having my p-value was greater than my alpha level, which meant I had failed to reject my null hypothesis. It meant I was wrong, but that's okay. And it actually turned out that because there's such a small significance, it didn't fully affect, and it wasn't able to truly emphasize whether or not it would have worked. Overall, my study aimed to prove whether or not people could identify the difference between AI and human composed music, and I focused on whether or not people could. Well, so I didn't find any certain research talking about my thing just because it's kind of like, no one really talks about it. So I thought that was kind of weird because for me it's like something I have been thinking about and no one actually talks about it. But they did find things with like teachers and AI and just music and AI being created. So I focused on those, and I thought it would be important to show future composers about whether or not it's something we should look at and how people are actually able to tell the difference when looking at these two pieces. I did have some limitations, unfortunately, but one of those being my participants. So I had Bassett staff, which I absolutely adore and love. Unfortunately, not all of them love responding to their email, which meant I was not able to get all of my teachers to participate in the study. I ended up with 28 in one group and 26 in the other, even though I did hunt them down in the hallways and made sure they knew that I had sent them that email. Apart from that, I had to do it online because I'm a worker. I was at Chick-fil-A every day, and there was no time for me to stay after school and take place with the study, so I just did it online, which probably hindered whether or not it turned out right, because people could have just cheated and been like, what do you think? Hopefully they didn't, because they're teachers, you know, against cheating. I also had limited area, so I focused on math and stats just because I go there, and I'm like right there, in comparison to like Magna-Vista, which is like 30 minutes away, and Martinsville, which is like 20 minutes away. I didn't feel like wasting as much gas because I only get paid so much, and I didn't want it to go that far. For future researchers, I would hope that they look into other cities and regions, just because I feel like based on where you live, that might influence whether or not you think something is AI or not, based on that, along with your occupation. So I would look into other groups, not just teachers, maybe like business people or actual music composers, and seeing whether or not they play a role in doing this. I would also suggest doing it in person. Obviously, having a time set up and everything would definitely change whether or not someone would choose an answer, because I do know from what I heard some teachers ask their students. No shade, but. Finally, I would like to thank the Vassar High School staff, specifically these 4 in front of me, because they all participated in my study and did fill out the survey, which I love. Along with Miss Samantha Spencer for helping me out with everything and making my life slightly easy, but also really difficult. I'd like to thank Miss Whitaker and Miss Harrell because they both helped me with my stats, considering I forgot everything I had learned from junior year. A little rough, but it's okay. And I'd like to thank all of you guys today for being here and listening to my lovely presentation. Thank you. Any questions?
Of course there's questions. You're expecting them, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I do have a background in music. I've played the flute since I was in 4th grade. So I felt when you gave me the survey that, oh, I'm gonna get this. And I did, I guessed correctly. So do you think that familiarity with a particular music style would affect the person's ability to detect the AI-generated compositions within that particular genre?
100%. So for me, for example, I have been exposed to music my entire life. My sisters are in band and everything, so they have their takes on classical music and everything. There's like, with AI, it works so hard towards perfection that you can hear how it doesn't sound real. But to someone who doesn't focus on music that easily, when they hear it, they might just think, oh, this is a regular piece. I know when I showed it to my classmate, he was like, oh yeah, this sounds real, even though it wasn't. So I think it definitely does play a role.
So how do you think that more exposure, like people's exposure to AI-generated music, is going to impact and affect people's perceptions of the music industry and, you know, the value of it?
I think with the more that AI starts to grow into the industry, it's going to change a lot of people's views, because right now it is being viewed negatively. I know there was an instance that in the Grammys, I might believe, somebody won an award for having used AI, and a lot of people were upset about that. There was an outrage online because it discredited the honor that the actual actors had put into that. So I think something similar, if that were to happen with music composers, if one were to be granted an award because of an AI piece compared to the ones who actually created one, it would spark backlash. So I don't think it would end very well unless we were to find ways to use it, not in like full-on composition, but in ways to help us.
Very nice. I have 2 things. One's an observation and one's a question. You mentioned during your process, you said that there was like a specific piece of your research that nobody was finding stuff about, nobody was really writing about. That's a good thing, because that means there's a gap somewhere. So your study and everything that you're doing here is great, because you're filling that gap.
Thank you.
Second thing, you segued into it. Why do you think people hate AI so much? Like, what is it about AI writing, AI music, and not just teachers, but also people who consume that kind of media? Some people just absolutely hate it. Why do you think that is?
Well, it can be for multiple reasons, because I know AI, for example, some types of AI, they actually harm the environment. So the more usage of it, the more it destroys our planet, and that's a big reason why a lot of people are against using it. It's not just teachers, as well about people using it to cheat. For example, me, I don't like the use of AI in assignments because I find it unfair and it like angers me in a way because I'm like putting my hard work into something and then you're just cheating and getting a good grade. So it's just that feeling of, oh, well, this is disingenuous, this is not, you're not putting in the effort to do something. So using AI is basically like cheating, and people find it like the easy way out instead of putting in the hard work, which is why people hate it so much.
If you could give me 3 words that you would say AI music laugh, what are 3 words that you would use?
I'm so sorry, could you repeat the first half?
Okay, so we're talking about AI music
Yes, ma'am.
versus music that I would play on the piano or whatever. What 3 words would you use to describe what the AI music would lack?
Sincerity, imperfection, and honesty. Because, like I said, AI doesn't focus on the imperfections. Humans, I think what makes music so special is the imperfections that it has. And then when AI goes and creates the music with no imperfections at all, it sounds wrong. It doesn't feel right. So I think that's something important.
How do you feel about the possibility of using AI for other areas in the fine arts?
I'm not against AI. I think if we were to use it in certain methods, like use it in other fine arts, so maybe in like drama, if we were to use it to gain ideas, new different ways to make things work, to give us more inspiration, I feel like that's a lot more different than having it create your own work and devaluing the work that other people put in. It would help them. So I think there are ways that AI can be used to help instead of just make people hate it. And thank you.
Thank you. And last up, we have Sandy.
Hello, so my name is Sandy George, and my topic is on the PTSD rates among first responders. So I wanted to start off by telling you a little bit about me. I'm currently a senior at Bassett High School, and after graduating, I plan to further my education at Virginia Tech and major in biological science to go down a pre-medical route. So I want to tell you why I chose this topic. I have many first responders in my family. My uncle, my aunt, and my grandpa are all with the Patrick and Henry Volunteer Fire Department, so I see the things that they go through and how it can affect them. Also wanted to just highlight the commonality of PTSD, because by doing this, we can allow others to know that they are not alone and that they can reach out for support and not be alone. So to begin, I read a study by Stefanovic, and I found that PTSD was defined as a highly prevalent and disabling disorder with onset after traumatic experiences. I also found that the current diagnostic criteria was a trauma and stress-related disorder. I also found that there was a lot of things that were linked to the development of PTSD, like verbal and physical assault, caring for ill patients, and responding to motor vehicle accidents. So when I started looking at PTSD, I found that it was very important to study the symptoms of this. And there were a lot of psychological symptoms for this, like being easily startled, having nightmares, feeling numb, and avoiding people. And there was a lot of difficulty diagnosing this because there was so much symptom overlap with other disorders. So I also found that there were a lot of external effects on individuals. There were many physical effects on these people, like they would there's a lot of social exclusion. They also had cardiac arrest and back pain. And in a study done by Acuna, they found that they did a study where they surveyed college students, and the students who were not properly taken care of after being diagnosed with PTSD, they had a significant change in their grades. I also want to say that PTSD does not only affect the person who is diagnosed with this, but it also affects their loved ones, as they are their main support system. So there are a lot of disorders in first responders, not only PTSD. A lot of people develop anxiety disorder because anxiety disorder is exactly like it is, and it's just anxiety. And there's another disorder called acute stress disorder, but with this disorder, the symptoms only last between 3 days and 4 weeks, and anything after that, they had to go back for further testing to see if they had PTSD. There's also another disorder called adjustment disorder, and this is kind of the same as acute stress disorder, except this one, their symptoms lasted for about 6 months, and if it didn't lessen after 6 months, they also had to go back for further testing. So when I looked at PTSD in first responders, I found that first responders were at very high risk for developing PTSD because they're commonly exposed to this in their day-to-day jobs. It's also very important to note that not only do people develop PTSD from responding to these accidents, but they also can develop it from workplace violence and not getting the proper care from their leaders. It's also important to note that support systems are very huge, and when going through something that is very traumatic, then you need a great support system so that can lessen your symptoms. So this research all leads me to my research question, which is there a difference in the PTSD rates among first responders? So for my method, I just wanted to see if there was a difference in the rates among different first responders, so like paramedics, police officers, and firefighters. And my study is observational because I was just looking at these rates and I wasn't actually experiencing something. And my variables was just the PTSD rates among these groups. So my participants were the Henry County firefighters, paramedics, and police officers. I made them all sign consent forms, and I informed them about my study before allowing them to participate. And to make sure they knew that the study was going to be anonymous and that none of their personal information would get out, I assigned them numbers when recording their data. So to prepare for the study, it was a very long process, but I went online and I found a survey, and it was from Mind Diagnostic. This took about 3 minutes for each participant to take, and then after they finished, it popped up a score and I recorded that data. So to collect this data, I put each of them in a group. So I had a group of paramedics, I had a group of police officers, and I had a group of firefighters. And I did a simple random sample from each of those, meaning that I went through the list and I numbered them, and then I put them in a random number generator, and I got 30 participants from each group. This led me to have 90 individuals total for my sample size, and I recorded all of my data on a Google Docs. So for my hypothesis, my null hypothesis, which is what I'm trying to prove is wrong, stated that the distribution of PTSD was the same among all of those. The alternate hypothesis, which is what I believe, is that the rates among first responders would be different. So when I analyzed my results, it was very important to note that anybody who got a 31 or higher on this quiz was said to have PTSD. So I found that out of my participants, that 64% of them actually did have PTSD from taking this quiz, and that 36% of them ended up not having PTSD. So when I did my study, I did a chi-square goodness of fit test, and this shows the difference between an observed amount and an expected account. And my expected count with PTSD was 19.3%. My expected count without PTSD was 10.6%. My observed count with was 58, and my observed count without was 32. So my chi-square statistic, I got 7.87, which is the deviation between the observed count and the expected count. My degree of freedom was 2, and my p-value was 0.019. And since this is smaller than my alpha level, then I did reject my null hypothesis. So to conclude, there was a difference in the rates among PTSD and different first responders. I thought that they would be different because although they do go through similar scenarios, they also work in different locations. Even though it's still in Henry County, there are different stations. And then I just wanted to say that this is a very important situation because if somebody's going through PTSD and they do not get the proper help that they need, that they could go through a lot of other things. So I had a lot of limitations for mine. I had a sample size of 90 individuals, but although I had 90, it's still not that big of a sample size. We could have went to a more populated area and got a larger group so that we could see how different cities affect our results. There also could be self-reporting bias because although they are the ones who are experiencing these things, they also could look over some symptoms because they could feel as if they were overlooked when they try to speak out to someone. I also think that I wasn't able to look at different diverse working environments, and I kind of looked over this because I don't know how their support systems are within the groups. So I didn't know if, like, for example, Philadelphia had a better strong support system than Bassett. And there were also other confounding variables, like the things they were going through at home and if they were able to get the proper help. So I think future research should look into better support for these individuals. Like each station could have a certain day that they have people come up there, like therapists or support animals. I think that future research should also look at different ways to measure PTSD because I did not have the funding to actually get counselors to do this. So instead I did an online survey to get mine. And I think that they should look into different work environments and see how that affects their PTSD rates. So I wanted to say thank you to my judges and audience for being here tonight. I wanted to thank all the Henry County first responders that participated in my study. I want to thank Ms. Holly Dillon for taking time out of her office hours to allow me to present in her room when I had the biggest class. And I not only wanted to individually thank Ms. Samantha Spencer for helping me, but I would like to thank her as the whole senior class and for allowing us to be her last senior class to ever present and being the biggest support system for us. And now I will take any questions.
You mentioned taking samples in other areas, other locations.
Yes, ma'am.
What locations would you choose, if you could, to go and do samples from? And how do you think the demographics of that area would affect your outcomes?
I would go to a higher populated area like Roanoke instead of our small county, although we do have a lot of calls that come through our county. I feel like going to a more populated area where a lot more people are, that there would be different type of calls and then there would just be more people that we could survey.
How do you feel the longevity of the person working will affect your outcome? For instance, had they been on the job 2 years versus they've been on the job 15, 20 years?
I did not look at that much in my research, but I do think that that really could have effect on it because someone who has just started the job may not have any of the same experience as people who have worked for multiple years. Thank you.
I'm curious, specifically gender, did you notice anything, well, I don't even know if you had the breakdown of it, but was there a certain percentage of men or women? Did you notice any significant difference with those two?
So I did not look into gender when I was doing this. I only looked into the 3 different groups of first responders, and I didn't want to like pinpoint a certain gender for this.
Okay.
had like a stronger support system even at their jobs. Like when they would go to work and if their coworkers would sit down and talk to them about things that happened, that they were more likely to get over these things and they didn't let it like build up on their chest, and they would actually reach out to help. And also loved ones, they would really rely on their family members and friends, but when they weren't able to get that support from their family members and friends, then it had a huge effect on them. Thank you.
All right, I have the pleasure of giving the last question. All right, so were there, I don't know if you found this in your research or not, but were there any specific job-related experiences that contributed most to PTSD in each of the first responder groups?
Yes, so I found that responding to most motor vehicle accidents were the most traumatic for most people because anything could happen